A 9-year-old boy whispered through tears, "Please, I'll be more careful," until his mother came home early one day. What she discovered made her blood run cold. Hello, friends. Welcome to our story. Before we start, please like this video and subscribe. Also, tell us in the comments where you're watching from. New York, London, maybe South Africa, or Jamaica. We want to know. The morning sun filtered through the white curtains of the Parker house, casting soft golden light across the living room. From the outside, the two-story home looked perfect. A neat lawn, a blue front door with a brass knocker, flowers planted in rows along the pathway. The kind of house where happy families live. But inside, the air felt different. Heavy, like everyone was holding their breath. In his small bedroom upstairs, 9-year-old Ethan Parker was already awake. He sat on the edge of his bed, his brown skin still warm from sleep, his curly black hair uncombed. He didn't move quickly. He didn't jump out of bed like other kids his age. Instead, he listened. His dark eyes stared at the door as he tilted his head slightly, straining to hear any sound from downstairs. Was Daniel awake yet? Was he in a good mood or a bad one? Ethan had learned to read the mornings like a map. If he heard the coffee machine start, that was good. If he heard footsteps that were slow and steady, that meant Daniel was calm. But if he heard nothing, complete silence, that was the most dangerous. Because silence meant Daniel was waiting, watching, ready to find something wrong. Ethan slipped out of bed quietly, his bare feet making no sound on the carpet. He moved like a shadow, careful not to let the floorboards creak. He pulled on a school uniform, a blue polo shirt and khaki pants, making sure every button was fastened, every wrinkle smoothed. Daniel hated wrinkles. He hated anything out of place. Downstairs, Daniel Reed stood in the kitchen, a tall man with broad shoulders and a sharp jawline. He wore a pressed gray shirt tucked into dark jeans, his black hair cut short and neat. He looked like the kind of man people would call dependable, respectable, a good stepfather. But Ethan knew better. Daniel poured himself a cup of coffee and turned toward the stairs, his eyes cold and calculating. He didn't smile. He rarely smiled, at least not when Olivia wasn't around. Ethan appeared at the bottom of the stairs, his backpack already on his shoulders, his shoes tied perfectly. "Good morning," Ethan said softly, his voice barely above a whisper. Daniel looked him up and down, his eyes scanning like a judge inspecting evidence. "Your shirt's untucked on the left side," Daniel said flatly. Ethan's heart sank. He quickly reached down and tucked it in, his hands trembling slightly. "Sorry," Ethan whispered. "Sorry doesn't fix sloppy," Daniel replied, turning back to his coffee. "You think your teachers are going to respect you looking like that? You think anyone's going to take you seriously if you can't even dress yourself properly?" Ethan said nothing. He had learned that talking back, even to defend himself, only made things worse. "Go check the living room," Daniel continued without looking at him. "Make sure the pillows are straight. And the remote goes on the left side of the table, not the right. I shouldn't have to keep telling you." "Yes, sir," Ethan said, his voice tight. He walked into the living room, his small hands adjusting the pillows on the couch, making sure each one sat at the exact angle Daniel liked. He moved the remote control, even though it was already on the left. He didn't want to risk Daniel checking and finding it a few inches off. This was Ethan's life now. Every morning, every evening, a constant test he didn't know how to pass. His mother, Olivia Parker, was a nurse at the city hospital. She worked long shifts, sometimes 12 hours, sometimes more. She wore scrubs the color of the sky and always smelled like lavender hand soap when she came home. Ethan loved his mother more than anything in the world. She was kind. She listened. She made him laugh when things felt too heavy. But she didn't know. She didn't see what happened when she wasn't home. Ethan wanted to tell her. So many times he had opened his mouth, tried to find the words. But every time, Daniel's voice echoed in his head. "If you say anything, I'll make sure she thinks you're lying. Who do you think she'll believe? You or me?" So Ethan stayed quiet. He became smaller, invisible. He remembered a time before Daniel. A time when his mother used to tuck him in every night, when they would eat cereal for dinner and laugh at cartoons together. A time when home felt safe. But Daniel had changed everything. Now, Ethan rushed through breakfast, a bowl of cereal he barely tasted, and headed out the door early, even though school didn't start for another hour. He would rather sit on the playground alone than stay in that house one more minute. As he grabbed his backpack and turned toward the door, his elbow knocked against the counter. A glass of water wobbled. Time seemed to slow. Ethan reached out, his fingers stretching, but it was too late. The glass tipped over, water spilling across the counter and dripping onto the floor in a steady stream. Ethan froze. His heart pounded so loud he thought it would burst out of his chest. His eyes went wide, his breathing shallow. "Ethan!" Daniel's voice came from behind him, low and dangerous. Ethan turned slowly, his whole body trembling. Daniel stood in the doorway, his arms crossed, his face unreadable. I'm sorry," Ethan stammered. "I'll clean it up. You'll what?" Daniel interrupted, stepping closer. "You'll keep making messes? Keep wasting my time cleaning up after you?" Ethan's eyes filled with tears, but he blinked them back. Crying made it worse. "I didn't mean to," Ethan whispered. Daniel stared at him for a long, terrible moment. Then he picked up a kitchen towel and tossed it at Ethan's feet. "Clean it. Now. And don't leave a single drop, or you'll be doing every chore in this house tonight." "Yes, sir," Ethan whispered, dropping to his knees. As he wiped up the water, his hands shaking, one thought echoed in his mind. "Please, Mom. Please come home soon." The sun was already setting when Olivia called from the hospital. Ethan could hear her tired voice through the phone speaker as Daniel answered in the kitchen. "Hey, honey," she said, exhaustion weighing down every word. "They're asking me to cover another shift. We're short-staffed tonight. I'm so sorry, baby. I know I promised I'd be home for dinner." Daniel's voice shifted instantly, becoming warm and understanding. The voice he only used when Olivia was listening. "Don't worry about us," he said smoothly. "Ethan and I'll be just fine. You focus on your patients. We'll see you in the morning." "Can I talk to him?" Olivia asked. Ethan's heart leaped. He stood up from the dining table where he'd been trying to focus on his homework, ready to run to the phone. But Daniel's eyes locked onto him, hard and warning. "He's in the bathroom right now," Daniel lied without hesitation. "I'll tell him you called. He'll understand. You know how mature he is." "Okay," Olivia said, her voice soft with guilt. "Tell him Mommy loves him. I'll bring him something special tomorrow. I promise." "I will. Love you. Be safe." Daniel hung up and set the phone on the counter. For a moment, he just stood there, staring at Ethan with an expression that made the boy's stomach twist into knots. "Sit down," Daniel said quietly. "Finish your homework." Ethan obeyed immediately, sliding back into his chair. His math worksheet was spread out in front of him, pencil marks neat and careful. He'd been working on it for almost an hour, double-checking every answer, making sure his handwriting was perfect. Daniel walked over and stood behind him, close enough that Ethan could feel his presence like a shadow. The television in the living room blared, some action movie with explosions and shouting. Daniel had turned it up loud on purpose. It made it harder for Ethan to think, harder to concentrate. "Let me see," Daniel said, reaching down and pulling the worksheet toward him. Ethan held his breath. Daniel's eyes scanned the page. Then he shook his head slowly, disappointment dripping from every movement. "This is sloppy," he said. "But Ethan started, then caught himself. Talking back never helped. "What did I tell you about speaking without permission?" Daniel's voice dropped to a dangerous whisper. "Sorry," Ethan said quickly, his voice barely audible. Daniel tapped the paper with his finger. "Look at this number 7. It's crooked. And this 5? It looks like an S. Are you even trying?" Ethan looked at his work. The numbers weren't crooked. They were neat. Careful. His teacher always gave him stars for his handwriting, but he knew better than to argue. "I'll fix it," Ethan whispered. "You'll redo the entire page," Daniel corrected. "All of it. And this time, use a ruler to keep your numbers straight." Ethan's throat tightened. He'd already spent so long on this homework. He was tired, hungry, but he nodded and pulled out his eraser, his small hands trembling as he began erasing everything he'd worked so hard on. Daniel returned to the living room, turning the TV even louder. For the next hour, Ethan rewrote his homework. When he was finished, Daniel made him redo it again, claiming the margins weren't even. then a third time because one of the numbers still looked sloppy. By the time Daniel finally accepted it, Ethan's hand ached and tears burned behind his eyes. "Now," Daniel said, standing up from the couch, "since you wasted so much time on simple homework, you've got chores to do. Discipline makes a man, Ethan. You want to be a man someday, don't you?" "Yes, sir," Ethan whispered, though he didn't really understand what Daniel meant. He was only 9 years old. He just wanted to be a kid. "Good. Start with the dishes. Every single one. And I want them spotless. If I see a water spot, you'll be doing them again." Ethan walked into the kitchen, his legs feeling heavy. The sink was full. Plates for breakfast, lunch, Daniel's coffee mugs, pots and pans. It would take him forever. He pulled a chair over to stand on so he could reach the sink properly. He turned on the water, squirted dish soap onto the sponge, and began scrubbing. One by one, he washed each plate, each fork, each glass. His arms grew tired. His back started to hurt from standing on his toes. But he kept going, terrified of making a mistake. He was almost finished when it happened. As he reached for the last plate, a heavy ceramic dinner plate, his wet fingers slipped. The plate tumbled from his hands and shattered against the kitchen floor with a loud, terrible crash. Ethan gasped, stumbling backward off the chair. Pieces of white ceramic scattered everywhere, some sharp as knives. "What did you do?" Daniel's voice came from the doorway, cold and furious. Ethan spun around, his eyes wide with terror. I'm sorry. It slipped. I didn't mean." "You didn't mean to?" Daniel stepped forward, his jaw clenched. "You never mean to, do you? But you keep doing it. Keep breaking things. Keep making messes." "I'm sorry," Ethan said again, tears spilling down his cheeks. "Please, I'll clean it up. I promise." Daniel grabbed Ethan's wrist, his grip tight and painful. Ethan cried out, but Daniel didn't let go. He dragged the boy toward the broken plate, forcing him down onto his knees. "Pick it up," Daniel ordered. But it's sharp," Ethan stammered, his voice shaking. "I said pick it up. You broke it. You fix it. That's responsibility." Ethan's hands trembled as he reached for the largest piece. A sharp edge cut into his finger, and he yelped, pulling his hand back. A thin line of blood appeared on his fingertip. "Keep going," Daniel said, his voice like ice. "Please," Ethan sobbed. "Please stop. I'm sorry." Crying, Daniel's lip curled in disgust. "Crying makes you weak, Ethan. Do you want to be weak? Do you want to be pathetic?" "No," Ethan whispered through his tears. "Then stop crying and clean it up." Ethan bit his lip so hard he tasted blood, tried to hold back his sobs. His hands shook as he carefully picked up piece after piece, his cut fingers stinging, his heart breaking. When the last piece was finally in the trash, Daniel released his grip. "Go to your room," Daniel said coldly. "No dinner tonight. Maybe being hungry will teach you to be more careful." Ethan didn't argue. He couldn't. He ran upstairs, his chest heaving with silent sobs, and closed his bedroom door behind him. He collapsed onto his bed, curling into a ball, his stomach aching with hunger. He'd barely eaten lunch, and now there would be nothing until morning. From his nightstand, he pulled out a small photograph, one of the few things he had from before Daniel. It showed him and his mother at the park, both of them laughing, ice cream cones in their hands. His mother's arms were wrapped around him, and her smile was so bright it seemed to glow. Ethan held the photograph close to his chest and closed his eyes. Downstairs, the phone rang. It was Olivia calling to check in again. "How's Ethan?" she asked. "He's asleep," Daniel lied smoothly. "Went to bed early. He ate a good dinner and finished all his homework. He's such a good kid. Thank you for taking care of him," Olivia said, relief in her voice. "I don't know what I'd do without you." "Anytime," Daniel replied. "That's what family does." Upstairs, Ethan pressed his face into his pillow, his small body shaking. "Mom," he whispered into the darkness, his voice broken. "Please come home." But no one heard him. No one came. The school bell rang at 8:15 a.m., and children poured through the front doors of Oakwood Elementary like a colorful wave, laughing, shouting, showing off new sneakers or trading snacks. But Ethan Parker walked in slowly, his backpack hanging heavy on his thin shoulders, his eyes fixed on the ground. He looked exhausted. Dark circles shadowed his eyes, and his usual neat appearance seemed slightly off. His shirt was tucked in, but his shoulders slumped forward as if he was trying to make himself smaller, invisible. Mrs. Carter stood by her classroom door, greeting students as they arrived. She was a kind woman in her early 40s with warm brown skin, natural hair pulled back in a colorful head wrap, and glasses that always seemed to slide down her nose when she smiled. She'd been teaching 4th grade for 12 years, and she'd learned to read children the way others read books. "Good morning, Ethan," she said brightly as he approached. "Morning, Mrs. Carter," Ethan mumbled, not meeting her eyes. She noticed immediately. Usually, Ethan was one of her most engaged students, always raising his hand, always prepared, always polite. But today, something was different. As he walked past her into the classroom, Mrs. Carter's eyes caught something. A small bandage wrapped around Ethan's left index finger, and what looked like a scratch on the back of his hand. "Ethan, honey," she called gently. "What happened to your hand?" Ethan froze, his back stiffening. He turned slowly, tucking his hand behind his back instinctively. "Oh, nothing," he said quickly. I wasn't careful. I dropped something. Does it hurt?" Mrs. Carter asked, stepping closer, concern crossing her face. "No, ma'am. It's fine. Really." Ethan forced a small smile that didn't reach his eyes. "I'm okay." Mrs. Carter watched him for a moment longer, her teacher's intuition tingling. Something about the way he said it, too quick, too rehearsed, didn't sit right with her. "All right," she said softly. "But if you need anything, you know you can always talk to me, right?" "Yes, ma'am," Ethan whispered, then hurried to his desk. Throughout the morning, Mrs. Carter kept a watchful eye on him. During reading time, when the other children eagerly shared their favorite parts of the story, Ethan sat silent, staring at the page without really seeing it. During math, his usually perfect handwriting looked shaky, uncertain. At lunch, Mrs. Carter stood near the cafeteria entrance, monitoring the students. She watched as Ethan took his tray and looked around the crowded room. Other kids waved at him, called his name, invited him to sit with them. But Ethan shook his head and walked to a table in the far corner, sitting alone with his back against the wall. He picked at his food, but barely ate. Instead, he seemed lost in thought, his eyes distant and sad. A sudden loud bang, someone dropping a tray, echoed through the cafeteria. Every child turned to look and laugh. But Ethan jumped so violently that he nearly knocked over his juice box. His whole body went rigid, his eyes wide with fear, his breathing quick and shallow. Mrs. Carter's heart sank. That wasn't a normal reaction. That was the reaction of a child who'd been startled too many times, who'd learned to anticipate danger. After lunch, during group activity time, Mrs. Carter assigned the students to work in teams on a science project about the solar system. Ethan was paired with 2 other students, Marcus and Zoe, both friendly kids who liked working with him. "Hey, Ethan," Marcus said, grinning. "You want to make Jupiter? You're really good at painting." But Ethan didn't respond. He sat at the table, staring at the construction paper in front of him, his mind somewhere else entirely. "Discipline makes a man. You're weak. Pathetic. If you say anything, she'll never believe you." Daniel's voice echoed in his head, drowning out everything around him. "Ethan." Zoe waved her hand in front of his face. "Hello." Earth to Ethan. He blinked and looked up, startled. "Sorry." "What?" "We asked if you want to paint Jupiter," Marcus repeated. "Oh, yeah, sure," Ethan mumbled, reaching for the paintbrush with trembling hands. Mrs. Carter noticed. She made a mental note. By the end of the activity, as students were cleaning up, a boy named Tyler accidentally bumped into Ethan while carrying a stack of books. The books tumbled to the floor with a loud thud. Ethan's reaction was immediate and intense. He dropped everything he was holding, stepped back quickly, his hands up in a defensive position. "I'm sorry," he blurted out, his voice high and panicked. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. I'll pick them up. Please don't." Tyler stared at him, confused. "Dude, it's cool. I bumped into you. It's my bad." But Ethan was already on his knees, frantically gathering the books, his hands shaking, his breathing fast. "I'm sorry," he kept repeating. "I'm sorry, I'm sorry." Mrs. Carter rushed over, gently placing a hand on Ethan's shoulder. He flinched at her touch. "Ethan, sweetie," she said softly. It's okay. It was just an accident. No one's upset. Ethan looked up at her, his eyes glassy with unshed tears, and for a brief moment, she saw something in his expression that broke her heart. Pure, overwhelming fear. "Can I go to the bathroom?" he whispered. "Of course," Mrs. Carter said. "Take your time." As Ethan hurried out of the classroom, Mrs. Carter stood slowly, her mind racing. She'd seen enough. This wasn't just a bad day or a child being moody. This was something serious. After class, she walked down to the main office and knocked on the door of Ms. Rivera, the school counselor, a petite woman with short black hair and kind eyes who'd worked with troubled students for years. "Got a minute?" Mrs. Carter asked. "Always," Ms. Rivera said, gesturing to the chair across from her desk. Mrs. Carter sat down and folded her hands in her lap. "I'm worried about one of my students. Ethan Parker." Ms. Rivera's expression grew serious. "Tell me what you've noticed." Mrs. Carter described everything. The exhaustion, the cut on his hand, the excessive apologizing, the way he flinched at loud noises and sudden movements, the look of fear in his eyes. "I've been teaching long enough to know when something's wrong at home," Mrs. Carter said quietly. "And I think something is very wrong." Ms. Rivera nodded slowly. "I'll pull his file." "Has he said anything directly?" "No. And that's what worries me. He's protecting someone." "I'll reach out to his mother," Ms. Rivera said. "See if we can set up a meeting." "Good," Mrs. Carter said, "because I have a bad feeling about this." Later that afternoon, as dismissal time approached, Mrs. Carter stood in the hallway watching students line up for buses or meet their parents outside. She expected to see Olivia Parker, whom she'd met at the beginning of the school year, a warm, loving mother who clearly adored her son. But instead, a tall man in a pressed shirt and dark jeans walked through the front doors. He moved with confidence, almost authority, his expression neutral, but his eyes sharp. "Daniel Reed." The front desk secretary smiled at him. "Here, to pick up Ethan Parker?" "That's right," Daniel said smoothly. "His mother's working late. I'm his stepfather." "Of course. I'll call for him." Mrs. Carter watched from a distance as Ethan was called to the office. The moment the boy saw Daniel, his entire demeanor changed. His shoulders went rigid. His face became a blank mask. The small spark of personality he'd shown during art class vanished completely. "Let's go," Daniel said, not unkindly, but with a firmness that left no room for discussion. "Yes, sir," Ethan said quietly, following him toward the exit. As they walked past Mrs. Carter, Daniel nodded politely at her. "Afternoon." "Afternoon," she replied, forcing a professional smile. But her eyes stayed on Ethan. The boy walked slightly behind Daniel, his steps careful and measured, his head down, his hands gripping the straps of his backpack, so tightly his knuckles turned pale. They disappeared through the doors and into the parking lot. Mrs. Carter stood there for a long moment, a cold feeling settling in her chest. Something is wrong, she thought. Something is very, very wrong. She pulled out her phone and sent a text to Ms. Rivera. "We need to talk to Olivia Parker as soon as possible. This can't wait." Outside, Daniel opened the car door for Ethan. The boy climbed in silently, buckled his seat belt, and stared straight ahead. Daniel got into the driver's seat and started the engine. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Then, in a voice so quiet Ethan almost didn't hear it, Daniel said, "Your teacher was watching us. Did you say something to her?" Ethan's blood ran cold. "No, sir. I didn't. I promise." Daniel's eyes flicked to him in the rearview mirror. "Good. Because if you did, we both know what would happen. Don't we?" Ethan swallowed hard. "Yes, sir." "Good boy," Daniel said, his voice returning to normal. "Let's go home." The car pulled out of the parking lot, and Ethan pressed his forehead against the cool window, watching the school disappear behind them. He wished he could stay there forever. The phone rang at 5:30 p.m., Daniel answered, his jaw already clenched. "What do you mean another shift?" His voice cut through the kitchen like a blade. "You should have told me this morning." Ethan froze at the dining table, his pencil hovering over homework. "Fine. Whatever," Daniel snapped, hanging up. Silence felt like a hammer. Daniel slammed pots around preparing dinner. Ethan sat perfectly still, barely breathing. At the table, Daniel watched him like a hawk. Ethan's leg bounced nervously under the table. "Sit still." Ethan obeyed, gripping his knees. His elbow bumped the salt shaker. It toppled, spilling white grains across the table. Daniel's fist slammed down. "What did I tell you?" "I'm sorry." Ethan's voice cracked. "Sorry?" Daniel towered over him. "You're always sorry. Get in that corner. Kneel. Please. Now." Ethan stumbled to the corner, dropping to his knees on the hard floor. Minutes became hours. His legs burned. Tears streamed silently. Daniel drank himself to sleep on the couch. Finally, Ethan crawled upstairs, collapsing on his bed. He remembered his real father's gentle hands, warm hugs. "Mom," he whispered into his pillow. "Please come home, please." Olivia's key turned in the lock at 11 p.m. The house was dark and silent, too silent. She climbed the stairs, her nurse's instinct prickling. Pushing open Ethan's door, she gasped. Her son lay curled in a tight ball, tear tracks staining his cheeks. His hand was bandaged. Bruises shadowed his small arm. His knees were red and swollen. "Baby," she whispered, touching his shoulder. Ethan jolted awake, eyes wild with fear. Then he saw her. "Mom." He threw himself into her arms, sobbing uncontrollably. "What happened?" "Ethan, talk to me." Footsteps. Daniel appeared in the doorway, rubbing his eyes. "Oh, you're home early. What happened to him?" Olivia demanded. "He's fine, just clumsy. You know how sensitive he is." "Sensitive?" Her voice sharpened. "His knees are bruised." He was kneeling doing a puzzle. "Mom, please." Ethan's voice cracked. "Please don't leave me with him anymore." Olivia's world stopped. She looked at her son's terrified face, then at Daniel's calm expression. The pieces clicked. "Get out," she told Daniel quietly. "Olivia, get out." She held Ethan close all night. "Tomorrow," she whispered, "everything changes." The doctor's office was cold. Ethan sat on the examination table, while Dr. Hayes documented every bruise, every mark. "These are consistent with punishment injuries," the doctor said quietly, handing Olivia the report. At the police station, Ethan's small voice told everything. The caseworker held his hand gently. Daniel arrived at the house, furious. "You're overreacting. He's lying, kids lie. Get out," Olivia repeated, her voice steel. Within days, Mrs. Carter and Ms. Rivera submitted statements. School records showed Ethan's declining behavior. Sunlight filled the house again. Ethan laughed, a sound Olivia hadn't heard in months. They attended therapy together every week. Slowly, trust rebuilt itself brick by brick. "I had a good dream last night," Ethan told her one morning, smiling shyly. At school, Mrs. Carter watched him flourish. He raised his hand eagerly, played with friends at recess, his grades climbing steadily upward. One evening, Olivia sat beside Ethan on his bed. "Baby, I'm so sorry I didn't see what was happening sooner." Ethan hugged her tightly. "It's okay, Mom. You're here now." They created new traditions: pizza Fridays, park Sundays, bedtime stories every night. The lawyer finalized the restraining order. Daniel couldn't come near them ever again. Ethan drew a picture, two stick figures holding hands under a bright sun. "Our family," he said proudly. That night, as Olivia tucked him in, Ethan whispered, "Thank you for coming home, Mom." She kissed his forehead. "I'm never letting anyone hurt you again. I promise." If this story touched your heart, please like and subscribe. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. Together, we can protect our children. Thank you for watching.